our listeners back to the Winning Response podcast today. And we have a special guest today. Our friend Sharon is here today, and she's going to share her testimony with us. And as our listeners know, last week we talked about Sarah, what a faithful woman of God that she was and is, and how the Lord gave her the desire of her heart as she found him faithful. And so Sharon has a testimony similar to that. And so we're excited to have her share that today.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Sharon.
All right. Well, I grew up in a small town, still live pretty well near that small town. Me and my husband, we grew up together. You could say that we were kindergarten sweethearts. My favorite story is like the first day of kindergarten, he went home and told his mom he was going to marry me. So many years later, that came to pass. And we have a little girl, and I get to be a stay-at-home mom for now. And I had a background of many years working in nursing homes, but now in a different chapter.
Yeah.
And we've been married now almost 17 years.
You brought up your daughter. Have you always had a desire to be a mom?
Funny story. No. Actually, the exact opposite. A story kind of within the story. It all started, it was one of those things that like the Lord just totally revealed it to me. And it all started when I was in sixth grade. I never wanted kids. When I was in sixth grade, I was diagnosed with supraventricular tachycardia, which is just a heart condition that means that you have an extra nerve in your heart that causes it to fire extra, and you have extra beats per minute that can, and mine would get dangerously high. And so it started from that as years progressed, the Lord worked with me and showed me that that's kind of where everything started, that I did not want kids. That during that time, I remember going to the doctor, and there was this one nurse, and she would tell me that she had worked with a patient that had this condition and that they died during childbirth. So don't get pregnant. Whatever you do, don't get pregnant. She told me that many, many times. And I was sixth grade. I was a young girl.
Wow.
And at that time, that's where I was like, okay, don't have kids. I don't want kids. From that age on, I was where I was not going to have kids and did not want kids.
Wow.
Well, yeah. The enemy used that to put fear in you.
Yes. And it wasn't until many, many years later, and like the full story of that, I mean, it's again, just totally the Lord that, I said, me and my husband, we grew up together. So growing up, I had been very blunt and honest with him many years later before we got married. If you want kids, don't marry me, marry someone else. I'm not having kids. We're not having kids. Marry someone else. And he was like, okay. So, get married. And I remember distinctively, we were laying in bed one night, and he tells me, he's like, whenever you're ready for kids, let me know. And it was like an absolute panic moment for me, because I was like, we had talked about this. I was very blunt that I was not going to have kids, but I really never knew the reason why. I just knew that I wasn't going to have kids and did not want kids at that moment. And we went to a marriage meeting. Our church held a marriage meeting, and we went. And the very first night, this was, a couple, I don't know the time frame, but a little bit after, him telling me that he wanted, whenever I was ready to have kids, to let him know.
Right.
We went to this marriage meeting, and the first night, the pastor comes out, and he is defining submission. And he's talking about submitting, and I'm thinking, I've got this, I make the bed a specific way because that's how my husband likes it. So, and then
here's a little funny. I changed the whole way I fold my towels because 23 years later, Ben tells me he likes towels folded a certain way. So,
yeah, so I'm like, I've got this, And he says, he defines submission as giving in on the one thing you're not willing to give in on.
Wow.
And immediately I knew that's what it was. And that whole entire week, that is where the Lord really started working on me and changing my heart to even just to be open to have kids. And so throughout that week, there was different, the pastor shared different examples and stories. And just that entire week, the Lord was just working on me. This is part of submitting, and that I was not open. And, the Lord can reveal something to you in an instant, and you see the last 20 years. And that's where I realized the root of where I didn't want kids. it took me back, in that split second, I seen the last 20 years, it started with being told you'll die if you get pregnant.
Yeah.
And it was just a moment where I seen it, and it was just as clear as it could be. And it was like a snap of fingers. I seen it all. And the Lord just revealed it to me that the reason I had felt that, it was the enemy installing fear in me at such a young age. I didn't realize it. And it was just, without really thinking about it or even realizing it, I should say, it was my thought process was, don't want something that you can't have, and don't want something that's going to kill you. Because if you want it and you can't get it, there's hurt involved.
Wow. That's a big realization.
Yeah. And it was totally, and then it was just like, the light bulb moment of, oh my goodness, this is what it is. And so from that point on, it was a realization of where that whole thought came from of never wanting kids. And then from that, I went to cardiologists and did the checkoffs of, did the stress test, did the test. And they're like, you're healthy. There's no reason that your heart would not sustain pregnancy or labor or any of that.
Wow. Wow. So for all that time, the enemy had been feeding you a lie
Yes.
that you had chosen to believe. We've all been there.
Yeah.
Whether it's this or something else. And he was stealing this opportunity from you. But he showed you, the Lord showed you.
Yes. It was totally the Lord.
Yeah.
It was, yes.
So you got free. Able to
Yes.
start the process of being free from that. Yeah. I love that. God's so good.
Was it kind of instant after they had told you that you were healthy enough? I mean, was it kind of instant, or had you softened your heart enough?
So no, that is again like a whole nother process.
Now you can get pregnant, but now do you still want to?
Yes. And so through that, after, I got the check off, the clear from the cardiologist, I was open. I didn't have that fear, and so I was free from that. And then, I don't really know the time span, but then started having some other issues and went to the doctor. And that's when I was told that there was really no way that I could have kids. That I remember one ultrasound that they did, the doctor had told me that my ovaries were pretty much black, dead tissues, and that there was no way. And they diagnosed me with PCOS and, gave me the list of complications from that. At that point, I never had my mindset on, I need to get all these symptoms under control and use my faith to get pregnant. It was, I don't want all these other diseases and all these other complications, and I don't want to be in pain anymore. And so I was, focusing on being healed from that and never focused on being healed to have a baby.
Right. That makes sense. You were more focused on being healthy.
Yes.
For yourself.
Yes. And that's where I was. And the heart change, 4 kids didn't come till later when, there was many years where we would go to the doctor, and like one doctor specifically would just hand me, after seeing the ultrasounds and stuff, they just gave me adoption pamphlet and said, if you want to be able to have kids, this is pretty much your only option.
Wow.
And so again, still at that time, I had to be on a medicine that before I started, I had to take a pregnancy test, and just for precautionary. And so the first time, or one of the times I was getting ready to start it, I took the pregnancy test and it came back positive. And at that moment, it was, fear, excitement. I didn't think I could be pregnant,
Right. How did this happen?
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
And so following that, we went, in for our first ultrasound, and, we are just excited, the impossible has happened, and got the report, there was no heartbeat. So, and at that point, the doctor was like, we can't explain it. And, we're surprised you even got pregnant. And so the first, start of the testimony too is that I went in for another ultrasound from the same doctor that had told me that, my ovaries were black and dead. And she's like, I feel like we need to do another ultrasound. And she's like, there is no baby, but she's like, you're not the same person. She's like, this is not the same person. What was once black and dead, all I see is pink, healthy tissue.
Great.
Wow.
And it wasn't until that first miscarriage, that's where the heart change came.
Yeah.
That I realized that I had that desire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The Lord gave you that vision.
Yes.
Yeah. And the
And the
hope.
possibility.
The hope.
Yes. And it was an encouragement. Okay. So I can get pregnant.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
You
It's
know.
okay for me to desire this.
Yes.
Really. It's okay for you to allow yourself to have
Yes.
that dream. Yeah.
Well, and that you were
Yeah.
excited.
yes. And that's where like I said, the heart change came, and where I really started to desire having a child
Yeah.
at that moment.
So then you hear that your ovaries are pink and ready to go and all that. So did you have to stir that desire up again after having the miscarriage to
Yes. Like
want to have another child after going through that?
for sure. So, we were hurting. The enemy, he's a liar. He's a thief. And, there was those thoughts he would try to feed me. That was your one chance, the impossible, and it failed.
Right. Like how many times does the impossible happen?
Yes. And you blew it because you were in fear to begin with,
Mm.
and just tried to put that condemnation on
Like
me.
it's your
And
fault.
Yes.
That it happened.
Yes.
He's such a liar.
And it's not, and
Mhm.
yeah, he is a liar. And it's, and so that's part of what we had to overcome.
Mhm.
And those, not yield and give into those thoughts and focus on that. And I just had to cling to, but it happened once.
Mm.
Mhm. Mhm.
It can
It
happen
happened
again.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can.
Yeah.
And so it did, and during that time, we went through a phase for probably a year and a half where we just kept having miscarriage after miscarriage after miscarriage.
Wow.
And, each time there was hurts, and, you want to ask why. And, the Bible, it says just a mustard seed size faith.
Amen.
And, sometimes I felt like it was like a shriveled up
Mustard seed.
mustard seed, and that I just held on to, it happened. I can get pregnant.
Mhm.
And during that time, again, still, not quitting, going to church, and, the Lord was using people to encourage us. One of a lady at church, she was talking, and she just, she shared a personal story of hers, that when her and her husband were believing for kids, that they just started Faith Prepares, and she started getting a room ready. And at that same moment, our pastor was talking about Faith Prepares, and we're like, Faith Prepares. And I remember from our first miscarriage, going out to the vehicle, and, we're sitting there and trying to control our emotions. And that's what came to us, was Faith Prepares. And so we went to a store, and we were looking at baby furniture. And, through the years of, going through the miscarriages, that's what, I stood on, was Faith Prepares. And so anytime, the devil was trying to, knock me down and, say,
This isn't going to happen.
right.
Yeah.
That, I would go buy something. I would go buy a baby
that's
outfit.
good.
That's awesome.
That's
Um,
good.
After,
And we've talked before about that faith is an action.
yes.
So while those thoughts are coming and the enemy's coming and telling you lies, you're stepping out and going and getting something before your eyes,
yes.
doing an action.
Yes. And so I totally redid a room in my house, and it was the nursery. And so one of the first things I went and bought was a crib. And I remember thinking, at one point, well, maybe I'll just get this crib, it's not as expensive. And that way, if it doesn't, I'm like, no. I went and bought one of the most expensive ones that I found on a website that I liked. I'm like, I'm going all out here. And so we, bought a crib and totally redone a room that was a nursery, when we're, still getting the reports of it's impossible.
Well, you made a choice
Yes.
to believe what God said.
Yeah.
Instead of what it looked like in the natural. And that's faith. That's a winning response. That's a response that is a faith response. And that's what this is all about, is for people to see that you can get a report that doesn't line up with the word, but if you choose to hang on to what God has said, that will get you through.
Right.
Even when it's hard.
Mhm.
This wasn't
Yeah,
easy.
No, it
It's
was not easy.
Daily
No.
you're fighting thoughts. It's not just you one day chose, okay, I'm going to do this, but I'm sure daily you had to decide,
Oh, yes.
I'm going to stand on what he's told me.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's, you can't quit.
Right.
And like I felt like so many times, where I felt like I was at my weakest point in faith,
Mhm.
and the enemy's throwing these thoughts and stuff at you. And, that, I would just go in that room
Mhm.
and I remember one of the main verses was life and death are in the power of the tongue.
Mm.
And so many times, like I did not talk, a lot of the emotions or feelings or things, or even reports, even a lot of my husband did not know what was going on.
Mhm.
Almost all of my family didn't. Like literally it was like me and my husband, and he didn't know everything because, there was moments where I felt like anything that came out of my mouth, it would be emotions. It was going to be words against me. And I just kept thinking life and death are in the power of the tongue. And I'm believing for life. I'm believing for life in my body. I'm believing for a baby that has life.
Yeah.
And that I'm not going to be speaking. And if I feel like I'm not built up enough or where I can say something, it's best for me to just keep my mouth shut.
That's so powerful.
Well, while you're talking, this is one of those times, and I think we've all probably had them, even in marriage, where you have to walk this one out. You and the Lord have to walk this one out. And there's been times where the Lord's had to help me, and he would deal with me, things I wouldn't even talk to Ben, because this is between me and the Lord right now. This is a walk that I have to do. You going in the room by yourself, you not talking, you choosing life over death was your action in that. Your husband's probably fighting his own.
Right.
As a man, men want to fix it. They want their wives happy. He wants you to have the desires of your heart. And so there's roads that each person walks out by themselves, and then there's some you walk out together. But you made the choice to still trust God.
Oh
and
yeah.
consider
Well, I
him
mean, I'm
faithful.
sure he was walking out his own walk
Right.
of faith. I mean, he wanted a child before you did.
Yes.
So he
Right.
had been navigating this whole season. It's no different. I mean, Abraham and Sarah, Abraham had to make his choices to stay in faith, and Sarah had to make her choices to stay in faith. Sarah couldn't ride on Abraham's coattails, and Abraham could not ride on Sarah's coattails. They both had to be in agreement on that for it to come to pass. And what you're describing is the same thing.
So just as Sarah, like Jen said, we did record about Sarah, and she's in Hebrews 11 because she considered God faithful. How did you receive the promise from God after the years? I mean, I didn't even know, like you said, we didn't know any of this information, the years and the pain and hurt and all that. How did you finally receive that promise?
So like I said, I used to work in healthcare. And so I would get up at 3:30 in the mornings, and going through the miscarriages, I recognized like the first symptom that I would have with pregnancies. But like, anyway, before all that, even the Lord, I would, spend time with the Lord while I was getting ready. And one morning a phrase just came up to me, and it was like so strong in me. And it was, I have happy, healthy, full-term babies. And just excited me to say it. I mean, like it just helped build my faith. And I remember just saying that over and over. I mean, sometimes it felt like I said it 100 times a day, because I have happy, healthy, full-term babies. And I remember I had gotten that phrase. And then, about 2 weeks later, I had noticed my first symptom that I would have with pregnancy. And so that morning I took the pregnancy test, got another positive, and it was different that time. There was peace. I remember going upstairs, waking my husband up and telling him, and he said the same thing later, that he felt it was different. There was peace. And that day, I remember specifically that day, it's comical now, but at the time the enemy tried to throw everything at us to get us worked up, to be like, how is this any different? Your day nothing has went right. And I mean, like, for example, with work, I was only supposed to be at one building. I knew I needed to go make my doctor's appointment. I'd called to get in, right away. And work was not going as it should. So it didn't look like I was going to be able to make that appointment, or I was going to have to leave. And, you work in healthcare, you can't just leave. If I just left and my patients weren't taken care of, that could cost me my job.
Right.
But it all works out. And I was able to make my appointment. I get at the doctor's office, do the blood work and everything. And I go to leave and I couldn't get in my car. My car would not unlock. It wouldn't start. The mirrors were going in and out. It was just acting completely crazy. And I'm like, what is going on, at this point? And it was the enemy. And it was just like, see, how is this any different? Nothing is going right. This is, this whole pregnancy is going to end up wrong. But again, still again, just in me, if I was ever upset, that was my go-to phrase. I have happy, healthy, full-term babies. And so I call my husband, he's in town, and it was even gets more comical. He comes to meet me at the doctor's office, and he's like, it's probably, the battery. And where I had parked, he couldn't get in front of me or to the vehicle. To charge it. And at one point he gets out of his car and his door handle totally just falls off in the parking lot. And so, at this point we're just in the hospital parking lot, just busting up laughing, because we're like, this is the enemy. We both recognize it. And we're like, this is the enemy. And so we're just, laughing hysterically at this point that, I'm locked out of my car and it's just doing all these weird things. And he's trying to get in his car. So he can't get in his driver's seat anymore because he can't even open his door. And so to give you a visual, he's 6'5". And at the time he was driving a small Ford Focus, 2-door Ford Focus. And so he was opening the passenger side, like climbing through to get on the other side so where he could drive and stuff. So very comical. And then at one point, one of the maintenance guys come out of the hospital and he's like, I've been watching you guys for the last 30 minutes. It seems like you're having a hard time. So anyway, funny little side journey there. But again, it was, we're like, it's the enemy just trying to throw stuff at us just to get us riled up, to add any kind of dilemma or problems. Yeah. And so we, just held on that. That's what I just kept saying over and over is I have happy, healthy, full-term babies. And it wasn't until later that we realized the importance of what I was saying, of what that phrase that the Lord had given me. Yeah. So during the pregnancy, one of my first ultrasounds, that the doctor had told me, they're like, well, congratulations, one, on being pregnant and that you still have the baby, but there's no way you'll be able to carry full term. That they said that I don't remember the technical term, but they said it was like a heart-shaped uterus. And so the baby only had half the room to grow in. And so with that, and they had told me, if you can just make it to 20 or 22 weeks, we have a chance that your baby would survive. So we get back in the car and it was just that moment of, that's why I've been saying happy, healthy, full-term babies, because the baby's going to be full term. And that was my phrase. Every doctor report, every doctor appointment that I went to month after month, I can't believe you're still pregnant. And that was the first thing that they would tell me. I can't believe you're still pregnant. And that it was a journey, and it was a choice of, deciding if we were going to be moved by the reports, everything that we, say, if you make it to 22 weeks, we'll try and save the baby. Right. Probably going to have low birth weights because there's no room for the baby to grow.
Well, I don't think it's coincidental that initially you knew to keep your mouth closed, that you were not saying anything. But then once you got a word from God, that's all you spoke. Yes. That's powerful. We've talked about in other episodes about the power of our words, our thoughts, and then our words. And that was your faith action. But boy, the Lord is so smart. And you were led on what to do also, because you were fellowshipping with your Father and you were checking in with him, and he was showing you to keep your mouth shut. And then he dropped it in your heart and he was showing you, speak this only. And it's a key to your miracle, to your winning.
Well, and you believe that word that he gave you, that the power of life and death is in the tongue. And until you had that word from him, I mean, that's where it's like, as you're talking, I'm seeing the whole cycle from not saying anything, from first of all, receiving a bad report, then not saying anything, the Lord telling you what to say, and that there is power in what you say,
and that brought life.
Yes, and you do
that. Scripture has come to pass in your life. Yeah, It's exciting.
So, and then like, can I share the rest of the
Yes.
testimony?
Yes,
with
we
that?
need to hear the rest.
So, towards the end of the pregnancy, the next verse that I stood on was exceedingly abundantly above all we could ask or think. Because, at the time I felt like everything that I was asking for looked like too much. It looked like a lot, like everything was going to have to go perfectly for it to work out, carrying the baby full term. My husband worked a job at the time where he traveled a lot. And I was still overcoming fear of the heart condition, that I was convinced that if I went into labor and he was gone, that I would just drive myself to the hospital. No one needed to know, because I needed to be sure that there was no fear allowed in my delivery room. And that was, just really strong on my heart. And that was another word correction that I felt the Lord dealt with me, that instead of saying that, and I said it wrong earlier, I just now noticed that when I really had to watch myself to not say go into labor, because labor means work. I was like, I'm not going to overwork myself when I go into delivery, when I deliver. So for him to be home, and my job had changed unexpectedly at the last, few months. And so that didn't look how I thought it was going to. And so I just remember thinking exceedingly abundantly above all that we could ask or think. The morning that he was supposed to, when I remember, okay, my last doctor's visit, my husband was getting ready to go out of town within a couple days. And my last doctor's visit, she's like, I can't believe you're still pregnant. That was like the opening line to every doctor's
How far
appointment.
along? What week were you at?
I was at 40.
Okay.
I was at 40 weeks.
Full term.
Full term. And that was something funny. Like, when you are pregnant, like you get towards the end, you're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I remember my husband, he corrected me. And I was like, I just want this baby out. I feel that she's a big baby. And I would tell the doctors, I feel she's a big baby. And they're like, there's no physical way she is. And my husband, he told me, he's like, you can't be believing for anything less than full term. What have you been saying this entire time?
Right, yeah.
So at 38 weeks, she's not coming.
Right. That's so good.
And I'm like, okay. So then I totally stopped fighting and just decided to enjoy the last 2 weeks of
Sleep.
I wasn't even sleeping.
I don't know. I didn't sleep well when I was in the last few weeks. But
yeah. And so he was getting ready to be going out of town again. And at the doctor's appointment, she's like, well, one, I can't believe you're still pregnant. Two, I will go ahead and do an ultrasound because you think you've got a big baby. And if she is big, then we'll see about inducing or if we need to do anything. Well, at the ultrasound, she came back and she's like, well, I don't believe this. She's like, somehow you have a 9.5-pound baby.
whoa.
And
At 38 weeks.
Yeah.
this was at 40 weeks.
Oh, 40
This
weeks.
was
Okay.
at
Okay.
40 weeks. And she was like, so if you haven't had her, we'll see about, we can go ahead and schedule an induction and go from there. So my husband, he was getting ready to go out of town. The induction the next day did not get scheduled because there was a lot of other moms having their babies, so they couldn't get me in. And the morning that my husband was supposed to leave to go out of town for work, I woke up early and I was like, I think maybe I need to go to the hospital. Let's just go get checked before you go.
Yeah.
And I think I might be in labor. I'm not for sure. And which in part too, I guess I could share this too, that the Lord, he totally just protected us and our daughter during this. That at one point I was, I don't know, maybe 38 or 39 weeks. I think it was closer to the end of the pregnancy. And I started bleeding and hadn't felt any kicking, hadn't felt any moving. And, I'd went into the hospital and everything had checked out fine. But 2 months before I deliver, I had told my doctor, I feel like I'm having contractions. And, they had checked me and they're like, no, that's not contractions. So, I was like, okay. And there was, again, moments of the devil would try to bring me fear of you're already having contractions. This is not a full-term baby. And again, just up inside, happy, healthy, full-term babies. And so, and the Lord just totally protected us and our daughter. And so that's why I really didn't know if I was actually in labor that morning. because I felt the same that I had for the last 2
that you
months.
had.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, you're going out of town. Let's just go in.
Mhm.
So get there, and they're like, yeah, you can stay. This is going to be the delivery process. And so, which it was great because, again, my husband was in town. He was able to just call and be like, hey, I'm not coming. We're having a baby today, not coming in. So, and the Lord was just there through the whole delivery process. It was calm. It was peaceful. And what the enemy had tried to tell me that I wouldn't survive through, I slept through a lot of it.
Wow.
I love it.
And I mean, we laughed and joked, and the Lord he was there. And it was just all along the process, from start to finish, from miscarriage number 1 to having our daughter. There was he would send people to encourage us.
Mm-hmm.
He's so faithful to just encourage you along the way.
Mm-hmm.
One of the big ones was after our first miscarriage on a Sunday. My husband had been out of town, and he had got in at ridiculous, either super early on Sunday morning. And he's like, I'm not going to go to church. But then, cause he had worked all night, and he's like, I'm supposed to go to church today. We're supposed to go, let's go. And I was struggling emotionally, because that was the due date of our first baby.
Oh.
And during that specific service, the Lord had put it on one of the leaders' hearts to specifically pray for people that was believing to have kids. And that was a moment of a hug from the Lord.
Yeah.
No one else knew that.
Mhm.
My husband, I don't know if I never asked him if he realized that was the due date.
Mhm.
And I hadn't told anybody up, to that point that day was special to me.
Mhm.
And so they had no idea. So that was just a hug from the Lord, at that moment. So then, during the delivery process, again, just hugs from the Lord, confirming that I got your back, girl.
Mhm. Mhm.
Through one of the process, while I was in labor, one of the nurses, she said, she's like, this is the happiest baby I've ever seen. Just because her vitals were so strong. And she's like, a lot of times being in the birth canal for this amount of time, that their vital signs sometimes alter. And she's like, this, and that was her exact words, was, this is the happiest baby I've ever seen. And so me and my husband, we just looked at each other, and we liked it. We're like, yes, yes, it is. And so then when she was born, the delivering doctor, he weighs her, and again, happy, healthy, full term. She was 10 pounds, 5 ounces.
Wow.
And then he's like, well, did you, he was looking at my chart, and he's like, I don't even see how this is possible. And he's like, and not only that, but did you know that the umbilical cord was on the very edge of the placenta? He's like, that's low birth weight. He's like, but here's your toddler. And he handed me to her, and it was just, happy, healthy, full-term baby. And that is exactly what the Lord gave us.
Yeah.
And it was just totally him that sustained us, encouraged us. That, there was many times that, I didn't feel like we were doing anything, huge, but not talking and just standing on a phrase that he gave me.
With your shriveled mustard seed.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. That's all he needed.
Yeah.
That's all he needed. How has this is so impactful, but how has this win in your life, seeing what the Lord's done, his faithfulness, that nothing is impossible with him? How has this affected your walk with the Lord?
One of, I think, the main things, for me during the whole process, and even today, is just the identifying of fear, and that, realizing of where it's coming from and where those thoughts are coming from, and just knowing that that's not of God and that's not of my Father.
Right.
And that's anything that does seem impossible or looks too big, it's not. He's already given me the impossible. So it's, just nothing is too big to go to him about.
So good.
Such a good testimony. And you've really touched on the scriptures that were foundational for you in that time. Are there any others that you would share?
Not really. Those are my basic ones. Was life and death are in the power of the tongue, exceedingly abundantly above all that you can ask or think. And the enemy he tried several times, like to tell me that you don't have enough scripture. You are not. You don't know enough of the word to be standing on something so big like a human life. And that's just, it's a lie. And if you have one little phrase that the Lord gives you, or if you know one verse, and even if you don't know a verse, just open the Bible and read a little bit and one will come to you. You don't have to know the entire Bible.
Right. No.
One thing we like to ask our guests is, what is one thing you would encourage our listeners to do to win in life? If you could tell them one thing that to do.
Don't quit. It sounds simple, but I think of some of the best athletes, or maybe not athletes, but anybody best in their category.
Right.
They all have the same thing, the same common ground, is they didn't quit to get there. And not quitting, not question, whether you're listening to this and you're like, well, I'm not really believing for a child or anything. There's many other different things that no matter what you're going against, don't quit and don't question, is God big enough for this? Or does God love me? God doesn't love me because I'm going through this. That's all lies. And, don't quit and don't get offended at God, even if you don't understand why or what's going on. I was there many times that I didn't understand, but all I knew is I'm not quitting. And just even something as simple as like a competitive nature would rise up against me, rise up in me, that I'm not going to quit, because if I quit, then I'm really allowing the enemy to win. And if I get mad at God, even though I don't understand why I keep having these miscarriages, even if you don't understand why, these things are coming against you, that if you don't quit, then I'm not allowing the one who has stole my babies. I'm not allowing him or giving him a chance to win.
That's so good.
And that if you don't quit, there's a winning outcome.
Every time, right?
Yes.
Because God's word does not fail.
No.
Unless we let go of it.
Yes.
You didn't let go.
So he's so faithful.
Yeah. And so now you have a beautiful daughter.
Yes.
Who is full of life.
Healthy,
Full, happy, full-term baby.
Full-term baby.
Yeah.
Yes. And like he, done it all. The healthy part of it is after we had her, one of the nurses doing, the exams and stuff that they do, again, her word was, this is the healthiest baby I've seen. I've never had one score this high on this specific test. And so each time we'd hear that, it was just like, yep, happy, healthy, full-term baby.
Yeah.
So,
well, and throughout this, Sharon, from the very beginning, starting back in 6th grade, how the enemy came to you right there with fear that was a lie, that, that he fed you for years and years and years, that the Lord had dropped it in your husband's heart to have a baby and talk to you about it, which probably opened up the idea and the possibility of doing it, and you not quitting. A lot of people would have quit after that first miscarriage. A lot of people would have been heartbroken. A lot of people would have gone with the doctor's reports. They would have believed their ovaries are dead and unbabyable. whatever the word is.
Yeah.
But you didn't quit even the years afterwards. And I know how the enemy works with thoughts. In those years after you've, had miscarriage after miscarriage, and the thoughts that he's bringing against you.
Oh yeah.
And the fear and the doubt and everything else that he uses, but you didn't quit. I think that's why the Lord put you on mine and Jen's heart, because when we were talking about Sarah had every opportunity to not believe. She was past the years of childbearing age. I mean, she's 90 years old and would laugh at the thought of having a baby, but nothing's too hard for the Lord. Nothing's impossible. He did it for Sarah. She considered him faithful. You considered him faithful. You spoke life, and he's faithful to give you the desire of your heart.
Well, and your willingness to share what the Lord has done for you and your husband, and I believe is going to encourage our listeners that if It can be a baby that they're believing for. It can be a physical condition in their body that doesn't have anything to do with having a baby.
That's where I started. Was I was just believing for not to be in pain daily.
Exactly. That they, if he can do it for you,
he can do it for them.
He can do it for anybody that chooses to believe what God's word says and stand on that, irregardless of what things the enemy's thrown at them. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. This is a lot that I've never even shared with anybody before. So my heart is that it does.
I believe it will. Our heart is that this goes to whoever the Lord draws to it, that it'll be hope for them and help and encouraging. And they'll have a testimony based, I believe our wins, and we've talked about this, that our wins in life are not just for us, but they're for us to share so that other people can see and they can have a win. And that's how the Lord works, because when we stand, you're standing those years will, I believe, encourage somebody else to stand just like you did. And there'll be another little baby out there that wouldn't have been here otherwise if, and the Lord has a plan for everybody to have the things that he puts in their heart. And so I just thank you.
And what the enemy meant for evil, God turns it around for good. And there could be somebody listening right now. Maybe they just had something similar in their life happen and they hear this, they get hope. They have that same God that you do and they get a turnaround and they win. But it's a choice how you respond. You know what I mean? You can't give up and win at the same time. So thank you so much for coming to join us today. And thank you, listeners, for joining us. We hope that you have enjoyed this testimony as much as we have. And thank you for being willing to share. I'm sure it's not easy sharing all the details and all that, but thank you. Thank you for sharing. We love you. We'll see you next time.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of The Winning Response with Jen and Crystal. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and rate this podcast. And we encourage you to share with others. If you want more information or want to connect, go to thewinningsresponse.com. Thanks for joining us today, and tune in next time on the Winning Response podcast.